You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we have a special guest with us for an all-new anime roundtable for Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. And Travis, I'll let you do the honors of introducing our guest, since she's a writer in the anime section of In Between Drafts, not the film section. So I'm certainly not qualified.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So we have here Kayla Chu, the effervescent reviewer of Hell's Paradise and Overtake for the site. And I'm just going to gush for a little bit. We've had Kayla writing for us for most of the year now. And every single time I get to edit a review or another contribution of hers, it's just a joy. I hope you've been reading the Overtake reviews, John, because she's been after your own heart. Every single one of them has started with a racing pun, and I adore them.
I watched the first episode, so I can read at least one of them. I need to get on that.
Yeah,
I need a race there.
And then, of course, I found out that she'd been watching the show, and I invited her on so we could finally get this mythical episode out that is definitely not late by any stretch of the imagination. So please welcome Kayla.
Thanks for having me. It's so great to be back on the podcast. I'm excited to talk about this wonderful show.
I have to ask you, Kayla, since you're here, you're on the horn. We just, we have the best anime series list coming out on the site soon. And it's not out as we record this. Maybe it'll be out by the time people listen. But what did you put down as your number one when I got to know?
Oh, I got to be honest. I don't remember, but I'm going to take a shot in the dark. And I'm going to say, I think I went with Hell's Paradise.
I see Travis is looking like he's got that look.
Don't worry, gang. He's got the ballots.
Hell's Paradise would make sense.
Yeah. When Kayla first came on, one of the questions that I asked everybody is, "What's your favorite anime or manga?" And it was Hell's Paradise to begin with. So that's why I was like, we got to have her on the round table. We got the whole thing. And yes, it was your number one.
Yeah, I had to show up for the best anime of the year that I read.
Yeah, right.
Before we talk about all things Frieren and all things Journey's End, Travis, I've been getting these weird text messages. Want to know what they say?
Text messages?
Text messages, yeah. It's on my phone.
Like to your phone number?
Well, turns out we have a listener who is 1,000 years old. And they've actually, they've been listening to us for a long time, and they just want to know if there happens to be a way for them to connect electronically with not just their companions, but, maybe either electronically or maybe even psychically with the community at not just Rookie Pirate Radio, but also all things in between drafts. Unfortunately, due to their age, I have to explain this. They're a bit old fashioned. They didn't know, they don't know the ins and outs, but I know you're hip and savvy. You're tech cool. So what do I say?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to assume that they have like a rinky-dink old Android phone since they're sending text messages. But that's okay. Oh, okay. There you go. It's fine. There's a little triangle. If you go on the phone, there's a little triangle you can hit, and it says Play Store, and then you tap that. No, you got to tap it. Mm-hmm. You got to tap. Sorry.
This is definitely them doing
Vietnam flashbacks. Yeah, Vietnam flashbacks for me. No, you tap that little triangle there, and then it'll take you to the Play Store where you can download various apps. And one of those various apps is a little app called Discord.
That sounds fine, but what if my friend, my friend wants to find it on their desktop computer or anywhere else? Could they do that? Does Discord have a Windows Store app? I actually don't know. But you can go on the internet, whatever your internet is, and do a search for the word Discord there, and you will find it eventually. It's a little kind of like, it looks like one of those viewfinders, those old toys. You put the little sliders. That's what the Discord logo looks like to me. And it has little eyeballs. It's adorable. They just responded. They said the Discord sounds fun, but I'm not sure if I'd be able to go onto like an anime channel and even find the latest stuff written by Kayla Chu.
But you could, because once you have that app on your Moto X, all you got to do is go to the show notes, which is where you found John's personal phone number, and there's a link in there. If you just click that link, it'll open you right up. It'll go right into Discord. You don't have to do anything. It'll hold your hand and it'll say, "Do you want to come into the awesome In Between Drafts Discord server?" And all you got to do is say yes. I'm hoping they know what the word yes means.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe. And you know what? Since you mentioned the show notes, I'm looking right now and I see there's an email address in the show notes. I didn't even know we had one.
Yeah, and that's for the folks who might be a little bit shy, don't want to get the live updates when John has a crazy One Piece theory. You need a little bit of buffer room. You could send us an email, and that email address. Are you ready for it, John?
No, but say it anyway.
It's going to be rookiepirateradio@gmail.com.
Rookie Pirate. What?
rookiepirateradio@gmail.com. It's
not
easy
Yahoo
to remember because it's the name of the show.
Okay. Cool. Well, I wrote this all down. Kayla, sorry you had to go through all of that.
Oh no, sometimes I need a refresher. It's good.
Wow, hear that, Travis?
It's like twice as cringy when we have someone else here just waiting for us to get the bit over with.
Well, thanks. You know what, Travis? Somebody appreciates your explanations, you know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this show. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a new fantasy anime series from Madhouse Inc., which premiered back in September and is based on the popular manga created by Kanehito Yamada and Tsukasa Abe. Frieren centers around an elven mage fittingly named Frieren, who lives in a world reminiscent of Lord of the Rings, Legend of Zelda, and many a fantasy RPG where a party of variously talented heroes embark on a dangerous quest to defeat the evil Demon King. Only the twist with Frieren Beyond Journey's End is in its title. This story begins at the ending of a typical fantasy quest story, where Frieren and her companions have already saved the world and eventually parted ways. But Frieren, being an elf who is already over 1,000 years old, means that she will outlive all of her friends many times over, and even though this 10-year journey was a definitive period of time for her companions, Frieren struggles to accept that it was equally meaningful to her. The series kicks off as a slow burn vignette with Frieren trying to reconcile her feelings and insecurities before setting off on a brand new quest, this time with a young apprentice she reluctantly takes on, knowing their time together will be fleeting but maybe worth the experience. At the time of this recording, Frieren has released 15 episodes that you can check out right now on Crunchyroll. I believe it's doing 2 consecutive cours, and it's still ongoing. So, Kayla, Chu, we'll start with you. What do you think of Frieren Beyond Journey's End? Do you want this journey to continue?
Absolutely. I love that it takes place after the main adventure. It's just a really interesting take on the fantasy adventure trope. I think it's really interesting also that Frieren is an elf, because I feel like more often than not, we focus on the human party members. So it's really cool to see a different twist on a genre we all kind of know and love.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wrote a piece about this show back when the first 4 episodes premiered. They did a 4-episode block. And I kind of mentioned, I invoked 2 things in it. I invoked Lord of the Rings and To Your Eternity. And I remember when I put that out, I was like, how many people are going to argue with me? Travis, this is your chance. I think you've been waiting.
No, I think it's you pitched it to me as something very similar when we talked about it. I think on this show, I'm pretty sure that was a part of my reaction. Was like, that sounds a lot like To Your Eternity, where it's a lot more about the in between moments rather than the core of the adventure. And having now watched, I have watched all that has been released up to this point. And I have to say, it does have a lot of To Your Eternity's kind of similar tone, but it is much less melancholy than To Your Eternity, which is to, I think, the show's benefit. Because again, Frieren as an elf character, as a kind of a wizened elf character, kind of sits in a position usually in the trope where they're kind of like the wise mentor type, kind of disconnected and just over everything. I think of like your Galadriels, for example, be something I would compare her to. Actual Lord of the Rings Galadriel. And so by making her the central focus of this, there is a certain level of sadness to it, but it doesn't have the same kind of tragic weight as To Your Eternity, which is, again, I think a strength, because what you're seeing is Frieren like relearning how to build relationships instead.
Yeah, like correcting the mistakes that she feels she made when she was connecting with these three people. One of them includes Heiter, who is this corrupt priest because he drinks all the time, and he's supposed to be holy and righteous. Himmel, the hero, which she has probably the most confusing relationship with. Like, she doesn't fully understand how she really feels about him. And then Eisen, the dwarf warrior, who's there and who's awesome and fun. And I love how the show does go back to these different moments in time. We do go back to that journey because Frieren recalls that journey. And so much of it is her being like, I can't believe I remember this. I can't believe this matters to me as much as it did. One thing I really want to praise the anime for is how much it is in service to the manga. The manga is where I started with this, and I was pretty far ahead when I started watching the anime. And I just think the manga really nails this kind of unique brand of cozy fantasy. I don't know if either of you like cozy fantasy novels, but I have been loving the, I don't know if it's a resurgence or a new surgence, whatever you want to call it, of cozy fantasy books that are coming out all the time. There was Legends and Lattes was a big hit last year, and I remember people were like, "Yeah, this is fantasy I want to read. That's a little bit more chill, a little bit more, it's got a little bit more of a chill energy to it." But it also is unique, Frieren is, because it doesn't have this sort of over-the-top whimsy all the time. It does have the slow burn nature to itself. It does have a little bit of drama and intrigue, and it does have some of that existential dread too. What else would you compare it to, Kayla? Like, what is it about this show that's kind of hitting you the most?
The thing hitting me the most is definitely the relationship between Frieren and Himmel. And I guess it reminds me of the romances that I would read in like slice of life animes in a way, which sounds a little weird because we know what happens to Himmel and we know that Frieren is processing her own emotions and how
she's
she
the one
feels
who
towards
aged
him.
away.
Yeah. But the way he acts towards her and how he shows how he feels about her reminds me of those kind of overt ways that the main male lead would act in slice of life mangas that I would read when I was younger. And it's kind of nostalgic in a way, even though I've never read the manga. So I don't know, it's just hitting these boxes for me that I didn't expect. But I'm also coming off of Dungeon Meshi, so it does have a lot of the similar tropes, but it's different enough where I'm enjoying it a little bit more than I thought I would be.
I'm glad you brought that up too, about it feeling nostalgic, because I think the thing that I have liked the most about the anime specifically is that it is being done by Madhouse. Madhouse used to be a household name, especially when they were doing Death Note in particular. But for a really, really long time, they were right there with like Gainax and other recognizable studios back in the 90s and 2000s, when it was admittedly kind of harder to be a household name, especially in the international anime culture. And I mean, there was a period of time where Madhouse was literally getting licensing, like multiple licensing deals with like Marvel and stuff, back when that stuff didn't happen. And then some business practices basically led a bunch of their talented staff away, ironically, to found MAPPA, which now finds itself in the same position. And the studio itself, Madhouse, is kind of looped back around. There is this kind of 90s anime feel to Frieren, not in that it looks like it's from the 90s. It's very much a professional, well-rendered show for today. But the atmosphere, the line work, the background work, there is this idea that it's almost out of time. It's almost ephemeral, difficult to like really quantify, but you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? And that's the vibe that I have over this whole thing. Is like, this really feels like a show that Madhouse could have done in the 90s if they, had the technology.
I'm glad you brought up Madhouse again, because I do want to say my other Madhouse fave this year was My Love Story with Yamada Kun at level 999. I don't believe it made the best anime of 2023, but that's okay. There's mistakes made in every website, and I have to accept this one. But and also, Overlord is still pretty well known, and I think that's one of the bigger ones these days. One Punch Man, obviously. But I think Frieren is definitely like a big success for them, at least in the making. It's generating a lot of interest. I think that the fandom for it is definitely increasing. I've definitely noticed that, honestly, since, I wrote the thing about it and we've talked about it on the show, more people have been checking out the manga. And I think that that's great to see. I know Yamada did something before this, and I have to look up the title of it because there is no possible way I could remember the name of this manga. But Bochi Hakase to Robot Shoujo no Zetsu Botake Utopia. God help us. I don't know why it has such a long name. But this is like a post-apocalyptic kind of professor robot girl sort of anime. Very much worth manga, I should say, looking into if you're kind of curious about where this writer has been before and how they seem to have like sort of an affinity for women who have more sort of like a robotic, passive kind of demeanor that obviously reveals something else underneath. And I think that Frieren is pretty successful in that regard. That said, I want to bring up Fern, because Fern is perfect. Absolute probably my favorite new anime character this season, because she is just bliss.
I wholeheartedly agree. Fern's supremacy. She's a very complicated character to pull off, because she does have this kind of like dual role as both like the exasperated apprentice of a maniac, but also someone who is trying, I think, to figure out her own maturity at the same time. It's tough line to walk, and she walks it perfectly.
Kayla, are you Team Stark or Team Fern? I gotta know.
Team Fern all the way. There's that one scene after they beat the Red Dragon, and she tells Frieren only 2 pieces of treasure. It's just like so funny to me, because in that moment I'm like, okay, so she knows that Frieren is a hoarder and she's trying to keep her in control, even though their ages are so far apart from each other.
Exactly. I like how the passing of time has consequences in this. You actually do see Fern understands and knows her like she would if she was with her every day for years. Because she essentially grows up with Frieren at one point. And the way that they sort of interrelate and get along with each other. And I don't want to downplay Stark. Stark is also very fun. I love Stark a lot. But I think, the beating heart of this story for me is certainly Fern and Frieren, down to how similar their names are and that intentional choice.
So with Fern as well, one of the things that I really like is early on in the first couple episodes, she has to learn how time works for Frieren. And there is this moment of just sheer anxiety that she displays when the thought kind of comes over her that they could spend 10 to 15 years in the same location without any kind of like change or travel or anything. And as a result, she kind of like has a freak out on Frieren, not like an over the top one, but it's very, very clear that she's very much aware of the passage of time. And I think that's such a fascinating thing about her character to see up front, because she's still around now, and it's been several years, and the journey is going to take at least 10 so far that the anime said. I don't know if that's the case in the manga or not, but there's so much going on with her for a character who tries to be the straight man of the conversation.
Yeah, but we do see that change in her, right? Of like, at first she has anxiety about confronting Frieren about this sort of thing. But then as the journey goes on, she becomes way more emboldened. She becomes way more comfortable around her. And like, that's the kind of character growth that I think this show excels at. Because a lot of other stories tend to be a little bit more one note with character journeys, I think. And I wouldn't say Frieren is the case on that. And I also like how it's like, I don't know, it's like an epilogue of a story, like this whole thing. And I think that that's just such a unique angle Are there any other characters we should bring up though? Kayla Chu, I'm very curious. You mentioned the Red Dragon at one point. Are there any episodes that kind of stick out? Because I know like early on, it's a little bit more episodic, it's a little bit more serial, and then it becomes a little bit more like, okay, now we have this overarching thing. But yeah, what sticks out to you?
There's two characters in particular that really stick out to me. One is Kraft, the other elf that we meet. Only because he's the only other elf we meet after we learn about what happened to Frieren's village and how their race is declining because they're not typically mating. And I think his small arc where they're staying in his cabin is such a sweet pause from the rest of the story. It's just the four of them trying to get through the winter in the north. He's a priest, which is an interesting parallel to Heiter. I think he's really cool, but I also really like the driver of when they get picked up and then she loses the ring. Yeah, the carriage driver. I think he has such a small part to play in the grand scheme of the anime, but he makes such a difference to Frieren to find that ring that he is actually really important because she finds the ring after it's lost when the carriage gets destroyed. So I don't even think he's got a name, but he plays such a huge part in her story that it's really fun to see, in my opinion, at least.
That reminds me because we did touch on sort of the interesting dynamic between Himmel and Frieren, which there's a lot of implications in that particular episode with them. I want to just really point out the comedy in this. Originally, Frieren was idealized as a gag manga. That was kind of what Yamada really had in mind at first. And there are gag manga elements here. There's a lot of humor. It's not, laugh out loud, anything that's going to send you, chuckling forever, but it's more subtle. It's a little bit like kind of a dry humor, and there are just great moments. There's one in the manga. I cannot wait for the anime to get to it. And it's one of the funniest bits in like any manga I've read this year, where it's just like, it involves Stark. I won't give it away, but it's just so freaking funny. He has his like own little side thing that happens at one point, and yeah, it's great. The writing here is just sharply funny, and I hope you all agree.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I love the bit where Fern just gets really, really mad at Frieren's gift for Stark. That's such a good bit. Just stone cold pours it right all over her, and like I don't know if you've seen it, John, but that's one of many Frieren memes that has already permeated the culture of just like Frieren holding out the potion that, for those who may not have watched up to this point yet, it is a potion for perverts. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And so and she holds it out, and the subtitles say it's like, you give this to any man and it will bring him joy. And people have turned that into a meme, like replacing the potion with things. I love that kind of humor where it's just like almost super applicable. And then Fern's reaction of just like utter disgust and horror, but just straight faced. Like, it doesn't shock her. This isn't a surprising thing. She literally says, "I thought I told you to get rid of that." They've had this conversation before.
It kind of is like, what it's like when Travis and I are podcasting, if people are curious. John, I told you to stop giving out those theories.
It's like, no, John, we've explained what a Discord is before. And so it's like telling a whole story. It's like a manzai bit, like a Japanese stand-up bit, practically, which is not what you would expect in this kind of like fantasy, this kind of like thoughtful fantasy. But that's exactly what it is. It's a stand-up bit.
Yeah, the writing subverts plenty of tropes all the time. I think, Kayla, you touched on that earlier, like adventure tropes, fantasy tropes, but also anime and manga tropes and, kind of hero's journey tropes. But ultimately, it doesn't work just because of that stuff. It's not a satire. It works because there's just so much bliss watching these characters like interact. It reminds me of watching One Piece and just falling in love with the Straw Hat Pirates and almost feeling kind of protective whenever somebody might come along. It's like, well, do we let them in? It's like, would they really fit the energy of this group? Like, yeah, I think it's shipping for adults, I think is the term I would use if I was braver. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan, honestly, of just like the slice of life nature to this and how you can watch it. It is a little bit cozy and low key at times, but also there's a lot of action. There's a lot of magic, great music, a lot of heart pounding stuff. But if there's one criticism to throw out there, I've seen this criticism, curious if either of you agree with it, that the world building can be a little bit half-baked. Yes, they're trying to go for something familiar, but is it overly familiar? Does it have its own identity? Is the magic in here really all its own and kind of unique? It's like, oh, they're just shooting beams and they say that the magic is interesting. Curious what either of you might think of that, Kayla. Did you ever have that thought while you were watching this?
I do think the world building might be a little half-baked, if only because they have to go north, and it reminded me very much of Game of Thrones, like going beyond the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's a little half-baked, but it works in a weird way. I don't need to have all these details to be able to enjoy their adventure, but that's just me, I guess.
No, I agree. Yeah, because it's not the point. Right? Like it helps it that it's not bogged down in trying to be, outrageously creative in certain ways.
Yeah. And we get the names of these towns that they go to if we need to have that information. We're not being told every name of every village that they're passing through. And I think that's fine.
Because the characters probably don't remember anyway.
Yeah.
I do think the way they handle demons in this is really interesting because there are times when there's like little swirls of like, oh, I've never really seen that before. Like the way a demon is represented here. And there is something interesting there I don't want to give away. But what about you, Travis? Do you have any criticisms on the world building?
So what I will say about like the magic system, for example, is I wouldn't specifically call it like it's borrowed or that it doesn't have anything to offer because it's stolen magic. The series establishes that like human magic, mortal magic, is effectively reverse engineered demon magic, which is a fascinating idea. And if there was anything that I do wish that the series did more, it would be exploring the demons in general. I understand why we're not, because that already happened in the story, right? But
I have great news for you, Travis, as someone who's read the manga.
You have this. I think there's some people who might find an issue with. I don't necessarily find an issue, but I do think it's something that is worth looking at. Where Frieren very much has a specific idea about demons, and a lot of modern anime would open that up a bit and be like, oh, well, what does that mean? Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, like the whole first part of it is the conflict is like curses or demonic forces think they're the real humans, that kind of thing. Frieren does something similar pretty early on and does the complete inverse of it. There's not like this nuance or anything like that. It is 100% no, they're like feral beasts, which is pretty hard fantasy. It's pretty familiar, but it's not something that you would see in a show in like 2023. I think there would be like an attempt to add more nuance to it. The fact that it doesn't feels refreshing to me personally, though. But I would like to explore the magic side of that. Not that I necessarily need like a really, really hard magic system where I know all the rules and Brandon Sanderson's come through with like a fine tooth comb to make sure that it's all like fits together. I don't need that. I've never needed that. it works. So deal with it is completely fine. But just the idea that it's borrowed, that it's adapted, and that Frieren's mentor is kind of the person who was the best at that feels like it's something that should be more front facing for the series than it is.
I think it's growing into it, at least, as much as I can say right now. And I think that, yeah, what you said about the demons, like, it's so interesting because that whole little mini arc there, it's almost kind of grimdark, and it almost feels like a foreign invasion on our, cozy chill anime up until that point. But yeah, I think for me, it just kind of works because it expands the world for me. It doesn't, jar the world, at least at this current moment. And so I have some actual criticisms for myself with the manga that happened later. Obviously, we can't talk about that now, but it's still a fascinating story just to talk about. I like how there's just so much existential material here just to dive into. I feel like you could take a single episode of this show and talk about it with someone for hours because there's just so much packed in there, right? Maybe we finish this off with a little bit of talk on the animation, just the animation, the visuals, the music. I think it's all top notch. I really love this score. It's from Tomohiro Suzuki. I believe he did One Punch Man in addition to this. And yeah, I think that it's like, especially the Yasobi's OP for this is like a very specific kind of like, interesting art experience, honestly, that serves the story. I think, Travis, did it make best anime openings, Frieren, or no?
I would have to double check the spreadsheet again.
So.
I don't think it made. It didn't win the votes, but like we had like over 30 nominations total. Since you are bringing up the opening, here's my legitimate criticism: take that 3D statue out of that thing. Why did you do that? It stands out like it stands out like a sore thumb compared to like everything else that it's doing. Especially since there's a great tracking shot towards the end of that same OP where you have like Flam in the flower field. It's all big.
That's probably my least favorite shot in the OP. To me, that's the most like, I could see somebody parodying this.
Well, yeah, it kind of is. It's a very like, oh yeah, I've seen this before, but it's a hard shot to actually make work because it's got that rolling camera and everything with it. So it's like you could do that for the statue. You could do that. You didn't, but you could have. so that's fair. I mean, of course, Yoasobi took one of the top honors, and rightfully so. I do love the artist because they're both this and it's kind of hard to not talk about this and talk about Idol in the same breath. But both of those songs are written very specifically to be both about the protagonist and also from that from like its character's angle. I said protagonist, I mean like its subject. Correct myself there before they do in the Discord. Like Idol is of course about it's about her presence as an idol, but it's also about her internally at the same time. And I think it's called The Brave. The OP's like translation is The Brave is very similar. It's literally the pitch of the show, but at the same time, it's from Frieren's angle. It has her perspective cooked right into it, which is just extremely impressive, especially since both of those songs work both in English and Japanese. There's a lot of talent on display there.
Agreed. Kayla, any thoughts from you on the sound design or the animation?
There was the one shot in the last episode where Stark and Fern are dancing, and it is the best animated shot I've seen all year. It's just perfect.
When he's like swinging the axe, like anytime he's swinging the axe, I'm just like, I love how they like get his like stiffness just right with that.
They didn't seem to rely a lot on CGI for the animation, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that also reminded me or had that nostalgia of the old 90s, early 2000s animes as well, like Travis was saying before.
Yeah, it feels like this show belongs on a CRT TV is what it feels like.
Honestly, this feels like a show based on like somebody's D&D campaign, and I don't mean that as an insult for once. But okay. That's Frieren Beyond Journey's End, or The Final Farewell to the Dead. You can check it out right now on Crunchyroll. You can also check out the manga right now on Viz, which I always recommend if you're not a member already. This is a separate from the one we normally have up on the One Piece, so that's Shonen Jump. This is Viz, so you'd have to get a different subscription for that, but you'd get all kinds of really great manga through the Viz service. So do what you got to do. But thanks again, Kayla Chu, for coming on and talking about Frieren Beyond Journey's End with us, and what a year it's been. Is there anything you want to plug or hype up while you're here? I know you've been writing about a certain anime that I don't think Travis and I have talked about much on Rookie Pirate Radio yet.
Yeah, so I'll plug my reviews for Overtake, which revolves around Formula 4 racing in Japan. I won't give too much away simply because season finale just happened and it's just overall such a great anime, and it's an original anime. So hopefully season 2 will come and we won't have to deal with differences between the anime and the manga. So go check out Overtake and my reviews on inbetweendrafts.com.
Travis, I know we have the best anime of the year list coming out. I know we're also slated to talk about Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, since One Piece is going to be on break. Now, we do have One Piece 1102, which is out, about to be out. And I've read the Raws, Travis, and oh boy, Travis, I don't know what to say to you beyond that. But we still have some end of the year coverage to do. Hopefully we're going to be able to slam everything in as we can. Although, Travis, you might have to bring somebody else in if you want to do a best anime of the year episode, because I'm going to be traveling for the holidays. I might not be around, but that might be okay. You could find somebody else, right? Kayla Chu's right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that list, by the way, we will have that list out the week that this is being recorded, probably within 24 hours of this being recorded, actually. So look forward to that. Very, very, very pleased with how kind of we seem to have a really good spread. We have some wonderful taste amongst us here who write for In Between Drafts. I do want to say on those Overtake reviews, this was not on my radar at all. I did not know that it even existed, to be entirely honest. Like, I'd seen it like in the big My Anime List breakdown kind of thing, but it was not on my radar when we had our writers staff meetings or anything like that. Like, it was not on my radar for coverage at all. And Kayla's like, let me do this, and I'm like, sure, send one to me, let's see. And then I started watching it as a result. Like, it is actually that good.
Wow. When you know something's on the up and up if the writing gets Travis to check it out, because I felt like I was barely able to do it at Frieren. You don't understand all the begging and pleading I had to do to get him to, but here we are, all these months later.
I feel like I'm being slandered in front of our guest because not everybody listens to the One Piece episodes where you pitch me on the worst anime in the world.
I think what you're saying is that I can't be trusted, and that's fair enough. But you can trust us to be back soon to talk about One Piece 1102 and some more coverage too for the end of the year. Thanks as always for listening. Thank you again, Kayla, for coming on. We'll see you all on the next one.